Hey everybody, welcome to the program WRSA Radio. I am your host G1. As always, I hope you are having a good week. It has been a busy one for me, and in fact, it's going to keep being busy for me next week, and that is a point I want to get out of the way here before I get into the meat of the show. Next week, I will not have an episode. I have some family things going on at the end of the week on Thursday and Friday. That require me to do some day travel, and I just will not be home in time to really do a show, either Thursday or Friday. So I just can't squeeze it in. I'm sorry about that, but I will return to the normal schedule the following week. So after today, no show until the 28th. I hope you guys stick around and listen into that episode. I really do appreciate you guys and your viewership, and it makes it all, worth the effort. I try to put an effort into the show, and I am very thankful that those of you who listen and watch the show all the time do that. Thank you again, loyal fans. Now, on to the main topic. It is an odd one this week, I think, because we have a couple of things going on that really are not getting the attention they deserve, at least one of these topics, with the public at large. One of these is not really getting any time. So, even on the so-called conservative media channels, just didn't really get acknowledged. And I don't think I've even seen any mention of it on those shows. But I'll get to that part of it after this first piece, which has garnered some attention, especially in the gun community. And what I'm commenting on is the continued assault on our rights. The First and Second Amendment, they're always under attack by the forces of tyranny, but this week we saw two attacks that are just really raw exercises in power by the forces of the international elites, the communists, the progressives, the others, whoever you want to ascribe them to, them, who run the country. The first example here is the categorically blatant actions by the governor of New Mexico. Now, this creature has issued a dictate from her throne that states that, well, because of a perceived emergency, this is her emergency, it's her definition of an emergency, that she was suspending the right to bear arms in the state. You can no longer carry a firearm, even with prior issued government permission slip, your little permit. Now this is of course illegal. It's not just wrong. It's flawed at its core, and every measure of no that you can come up with. I don't even really have to say these things. It's really self-evident how no this is. I will say without a doubt that this woman needs to immediately be removed from office, and she should never be elected or eligible to be elected for any position ever again. She is clearly unfit, demonstrably unfit. We can argue about the effectiveness of rules. We can argue about what should be a rule and what should not be a rule. We can argue about what the Constitution says and what it means. But what we cannot argue about, what is patently unquestionable, is that our form of government does not allow for the suspension of what we recognize as human rights just based off the dictates of a single elected official. You are not a king or a queen. You don't get to decide what is a right and what is not from your desk all by yourself like that. There's a process that has to be followed of what we allow and what we do not allow. Now, like I said, we can debate about that being a good or a bad thing. Okay, we can have that discussion. All that is beside the point, though, because the rules, the law, our history, our culture says that's not the way we do things. If you can't follow those things, then you shouldn't be playing the game. It's as simple as that. It's a simple concept. She got elected to this position, and now she wants to change everything. We can use a sports ball analogy for that. And, you don't go into a baseball game and you're 4 innings into the game, and then because you don't like the idea that, well, 3 strikes means you're out, you don't get to stop the game, one player, and just change that rule. Hey, no. I'm not going to be out with 3 strikes. I'm going to get 5 strikes, or I'm going to get no strikes. That's not how it works. You want to change the rules, there's a whole process for that, and it requires people to decide that's how they want to play the game in the future. And if you don't want your change, they don't want your changes, they'll reject them, okay? Or perhaps they'll tell you that maybe they will just, spin off and form their own league, and you can go do the things the way you want to, and then we'll go do the things that we want to. Of course, we all recall when the American League attacked the National League in the war of baseball aggression, and now we have that damn designated hitter in the National League too. But, nothing is truly sacred or exempted from tyranny, I guess. Anyway, this creature in New Mexico has decided that they don't want to follow the rules. They just want to issue these orders. And because of that, as I said, she should be removed from office. And it has to be this way. She has issued this as a temporary order. She says it's a 30-day order, which I guess the idea is, obviously that this will take longer than 30 days to go through a court. And if it does, and it's allowed to stand, and she gets her way, well, then it just lays the groundwork for, the emergency to just keep going on and new orders to be issued every 30 days. That's why she has to be removed. This has to happen. Now, good for the people of New Mexico. They are saying no to this. They're standing up. They're protesting this. We had armed people at in Albuquerque protesting this. The sheriffs are telling her that not only is this order unconstitutional and unenforceable, they're telling her that they will not even try to enforce this. And just imagine that. Just imagine from their perspective trying to enforce this. This order says that even if you have a permit to carry concealed, it's against this mandate to do so. In order for police to enforce this, they would have to stop everyone in public and conduct searches of them. Now, people would say, well, no, they'll just stop random people, and that way it'll be fair. So people just randomly walking down the street will be subject to detainment and an illegal search to determine if they are carrying a weapon. Now, this kind of stuff has already been before the courts, and it was determined to be unconstitutional, okay? Back then, it was Rudy Giuliani in New York City, though, and he was mostly stopping and frisking black people, and so that was, no, that's wrong, you can't do it that way. No, that's all wrong. See, it was wrong then. I guess it's okay now. I don't, who knows what the thinking of these people is. If we're going to have a constitution and we're going to keep a constitution, then at least pretend that you've read it and you understand it, and don't give us blatant evidence that you've done neither of those things. You swore an oath, ma'am. At least have the decency to try and hold yourself to it. If not, then you got to go. You got to get out. You should be impeached immediately, unquestionably. Now, even her own party is backing off on this and telling her, hey, you're going a little too far. But don't be fooled by this, okay? I know it was humorous to see even David Hogg of Parkland fame telling her, this is too far. Don't be fooled by that. Don't think it's because they don't want to do it. Understand it's because they think she has moved too soon. They don't like the timing of this. They fully intend to do this in the future themselves. They're going to try it again with COVID. They just don't want her to ruin these optics and give a victory to people who push back on this. They don't want people to challenge this and go through the legal process and have the legal side of the government come down on the side of the people and say, no, you can't do this. They want to move when they have enough support for it, and the people who resist it are in such a minority that they can be crushed. Much like the people who protested on January the 6th, which leads us to that other item that I wanted to touch on, and that being the attack on the First Amendment that happened this week. Now, I am speaking of one Owen Shore, who is a host over on InfoWars, the Alex Jones programs, show, channel, whatever you want to call it. This week, Owen was sentenced to 60 days in jail for his so-called actions on January the 6th. Now, what were Mr. Shore's actions on January the 6th, you might ask? Did he perhaps tear through the Capitol and steal a podium? No. Did he have the audacity to sit in Nancy Pelosi's desk? No. Did he have the nerve to photo himself on the floor of the House or the Senate? No. No, dear viewer. He did none of those things. As benign and harmless as those things are, Mr. Shore did none of them. What he did do was to speak on his show prior to January 6th about protesting. And then, at the time, they were in Washington. He was in Washington with the InfoWars team, broadcasting the protests that took place on January the 5th. Many people forget about those. There were demonstrations and things that took place on the 5th, and the InfoWars team were there, and he was part of that team. And on January the 6th, he was on the grounds of the Capitol, but he was telling people not to go inside. And for this, the DOJ asserted that his words, his speech, constituted an incitement and contributed to the actions of other people. So talking about protesting prior to the actual protest is now inciting people to protest. Now, this is the same thing that was done to the Proud Boys and their leadership. They got a lot of coverage, in the media. That group had a conference call prior to January the 6th, discussing what actions they might take, things that they could do in their protest, what have you. Many of those things, those actions, they subsequently did not do. They never entered the Capitol. They were not really even involved in the most aggressive actions of the crowd that day. In some cases they were, but not the main group of Proud Boys who were charged. Okay? In Rico Tario, if that's how you pronounce his name, he was not even in Washington that day. He had been arrested the day before on the 5th and told that he had to leave the city, which in itself is kind of a strange thing. But the Proud Boys were also arrested and charged and convicted of seditious conspiracy, along with the Oath Keeper guys. And now they're being handed down harsher sentences than literal rapists and murderers. For example, the man who ran over a kid with his car because the kid was a Trump supporter. He got less time in jail than these Proud Boys have been given for standing outside the Capitol and having a conference call the day before. Now, this is no real surprise here, people, really. Just recently, the FBI released documents advising law enforcement that people who support the Second Amendment are extremists and likely domestic terrorists. Now, Owen Shore is a journalist. You may not like his journalism, you may not agree with his presentations and what he stands for, but he is by all measure a journalist. Many of us don't have high opinions of journalists, okay? I sympathize with that. But it is what it is. And being at the scene of an event like a riot, for example, and covering that event as a journalist, even if you agree with the reasons and the cause of the riot, still means you're a journalist. And even under the most narrow interpretation of the First Amendment, you are within your rights and therefore not acting in a criminal fashion. I guess you can only favorably cover mostly peaceful riots as a reporter. And perhaps if those protesters in Washington had just burned down some local businesses instead of going into the Capitol, it would have all been okay and legit and fine. Maybe if Owen and InfoWars would just follow the guidelines put out by the White House on how stories should be reported on, they would not be subject to arrest and prosecution. They have time to redeem themselves, maybe, if they'll just report on how terrible the impeachment of Joe Biden is. Like how the White House put out recommendations this week to the media on how to cover that story. I think you can see what's going on here, folks. And ironically, the deep irony to all this is in order to fix this, we have to advocate the same kind of behavior. Because this cannot be fixed within the rules that we are currently playing under. And I'll go back to that sports ball analogy. And I do that even though I know a lot of you don't think sports ball or think very highly of sports ball. You think it's stupid and it's a waste of time. And I understand that. But sports ball is also a fundamental aspect of our culture. It provides a means of teaching to young people about fairness and friendly competition. And it reminds young people that they cannot always win, which is an important reminder. It reminds everyone that this is how culture and civilization is supposed to function. It is true that it can be used as a distraction, but I think that, bread and circuses and all that, but I think the overall positives outweigh that, as long as we're cognizant of it. So let me turn back to that analogy. When you're playing the game and we have an expectation that the other side is playing by the same rules that we are, playing on the same field that we are. When we discover that they are cheating, we expect that the impartial umpires or referees, whatever sport it is, will step in and stop the cheating. And when we find out that the umpires are not impartial and that they are allowing the cheating, then we're not playing the same game. We're not playing on the same field. We have no chance of competing on the same level as the other team. The scales are tipped against us. And then we discover that the announcers are not even acknowledging the cheating. They are pretending that it didn't even happen. Then we have no hope for advocacy. No one in this game is going to help us. Everyone, including half the fans, are against us and want us to lose. Well, then by all measures, let me ask you something. Is it not madness? Is it not foolish and beyond foolish, really, and well past idiocy, to even continue playing that game? To continue to expect the rules to be followed and that the umpires will suddenly change their minds and begin again to be fair and impartial? Is that not insanity? I think it is, without a shadow of a doubt. I think it's insanity. And that is, however, where we are. And there is no fixing it while we are still trying to play on that same field. Now, the only way to fix it, I think, is to step outside of that. To get rid of the impartial umpires and ban the other team from ever competing again. Because they've shown nothing but a willingness to disobey the rules from day one. Ideally, that would be done in a peaceful manner, but that's not how the game is actually played. Because we're not just playing sports ball. The analogy ends there. We are dealing with force and lives and the livelihood of millions of people. And this will not be settled by some meeting of a committee or some group on competition and fairness. Our enemies are great in number, but I think they're weak. I really do. That's why they need to cheat so much to get ahead. Because they know when the average traditional American is presented with the objective truth and reality, that they will not follow in the direction that the enemies want to lead us. We will reject everything that they want because what they want is for us to be gone. They want our destruction. No one is really going to willingly go into their own destruction. They have to be placated. They have to be cheated and tricked and deceived into their own destruction. But let's not just give it to them. You need to be training and learning to break the rules, because that's what has to be done. Now, that's all the time I have this week. Like and subscribe. Come see us over on Gab and the Mothership. And I will see you on the next episode in 2 weeks.